Penn State smashes SMU 38-10. This game went about as expected, and this game was over almost immediately. Penn State put up 28 points in the first half, 21 of those points coming in the second quarter. Obviously, the turnovers killed SMU. The multiple pick sixes, I mean, that just kills their chances in this game, which were already pretty slim to start with. So I don't want to spend too much time on SMU. I'd rather talk about the Boise State-Penn State matchup that we now get in that Fiesta Bowl. SMU, great year. They weren't ready for this, and that's okay, because part of this is Penn State has a really good defense and now has an offense that can move the ball, that can run the ball, that can do enough throwing the football, and they can put up points. So I want to talk about Boise State, Penn State, the Fiesta Bowl matchup, which I think plays on New Year's Eve. And then we got to talk about the Oregon game in here because that's a common opponent for both teams. And that's very important for Penn State because they just played Oregon. That was a good loss. And then Boise State played Oregon earlier in the year, and that was a really good loss for Boise State as well. And you could argue that Boise State should have even won that game. So that's going to be a good common denominator that we can look at between these two teams. The Penn State-Boise State matchup, obviously, is going to come down to the run game. Shocking. Boise State, Ashton Jeanty, that's their bread and butter. Give Ashton Jeanty the rock. Let him go nuts. The problem with Boise State, who is a current 10.5 point underdog, Penn State's probably going to sell it to stop the run. Or if they feel they can stop the run with just their front seven, then now you're going to put Boise State in a position where they have to throw, especially if the Penn State offense shows up, jumps out to a lead. Now Boise State has to kind of either stick to their game plan and try to get the ground game going with Ashton Jeanty, or they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. Boise State, obviously a very capable team, a very good team, and they played Oregon earlier this year, gave them everything they can handle. They lost 37-34, I think. Ashton Jeanty went nuts in that game. He had 25 carries for 192 yards, 3 touchdowns. You could argue that Boise State probably should have won that game, especially if it weren't for the 2 special teams touchdowns that Oregon had, which was the reason why they won that game. And this is where the Oregon comparison gives us something to look at. The Penn State offense went nuts. They rushed for 300 yards on Oregon's defense. So what does that tell us? Okay, Oregon's run defense is a little vulnerable, but that game was so important for Penn State, even though that they lost, because it showed us what the Penn State offense could be. We're sitting back and going, okay, Penn State has a 5-star quarterback, Drew Aller, second year as a starter. He should be coming into his own a little bit. He should be growing, developing. He should be able to push the ball downfield. They have a really good running back duo in Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, so they should be able to have an offense that can kind of explode and put up points, and we just haven't really seen that yet, at least at the top tier level of competition, right? Then we saw that against Oregon. Big Ten Championship, you get them inside of the dome on a fast track, and they pop off. So now we've seen what the Penn State offense can do. If Penn State jumps out to a 10, 14-point lead on Boise State, that's going to put them in a really tough spot because now do you have to throw? Are you going to stick with the run game with Ashton Jeanty? That's what you have to look at. Ashton Jeanty could have a big game against Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl. And what we're looking at is, first of all, he could break Barry Sanders' single-season rushing yards record, which I think he needs about 130-ish yards or so. I did a shorter video on this a few weeks ago on what exactly he needs, but that would be monumental and obviously a pretty big deal. But in terms of winning the game, my concern with Boise State is Ashton Jeanty, first of all, there's no promise he's going to have a big game. Secondly, if he does go nuts, it may not even be good enough because Penn State's offense might carry them through this game and put up 40. There's only 2 games this year where Ashton Jeanty has rushed for less than 130 yards. The first one was against Portland State, where he had 11 carries for 127 yards. They won that game 56-14, so they didn't need him to go nuts, averaged 11 yards per carry. And then when they played UNLV in the regular season, UNLV did a really good job in that game containing Ashton. He had 33 carries for 128 yards, 1 touchdown, averaged 3.9 yards per carry. So the film is out there and the recipe is out there to shut down Ashton Jeanty. And now it's like, are you going to hold him to 80 yards? I don't know. That would be kind of crazy if they did that. I don't know if this Penn State defense can do that because while Ashton Jeanty in Boise State, yeah, maybe they haven't seen a team like Penn State since Oregon in week 2, right? But also Penn State hasn't quite seen a running back like Ashton Jeanty, who's the best running back in the country. Obviously, Penn State has played Oregon. They've played Ohio State. It's not like they haven't played teams with a ton of talent, but Ohio State could throw the ball, move the ball in the perimeter. Same with Oregon. Oregon rushed for 186 yards on 41 carries in the Big Ten Championship against Penn State. And I just keep coming back to the concern if you're Boise State Ashton could go nuts. What if he has 200 rushing yards, 2-3 rushing touchdowns, but Penn State puts up 40? I mean, this feels like a game where Ashton Jeanty has to go nuts, obviously, for them to win, but he could have a really big game, and it might not be enough. If we talk big picture here for Penn State, obviously James Franklin and Penn State had to win that game against SMU. Now they got to win this game against Boise State because the path that they were given, I mean, they were just gifted this perfect path, the easiest path to get to the semis. James Franklin notched his 100th win with Penn State when they beat SMU, so good for him. And then, of course, he gets his first ever college football playoff win. But now you got to play and beat Boise State, and Boise State's not going to roll over and just let them do whatever they want. You do feel kind of confident in Penn State right now because of what their offense has shown that they can do, and their defense obviously has some dudes. They have some game records, and they're really good against the run. James Franklin has to win this game. James Franklin and Penn State don't have to win the national title or even make it to the national championship game, but you got to make it to the semis. You got to beat Boise State here. And I think that they do.